"What do you want to do to me, cowboy?" asked the Apache. But the rancher responded with actions. The sun had barely risen over the wide, open plains when the Apache moved quietly through the tall grass. His eyes scanned the horizon with careful attention, every sound of the wind or rustle of a leaf putting him on alert. He had been tracking the movement of a small herd of deer when he noticed signs of something unusual, footprints that didn't belong to the animals he knew so well. They were human, heavy, deliberate, and somewhat unfamiliar. He crouched low, keeping his breathing steady, and followed the trail, alert but calm. Not far away, a rancher was already busy with his morning chores. His small ranch sat at the edge of the plains, and he prided himself on the care he gave his cattle. Today, he had woken early to inspect the fences that bordered his property. He had noticed that a few of his cows had wandered too close to the land he suspected belonged to the Apache people. He moved with care, walking along the wooden posts and pulling weeds, making sure that every fence line was sturdy. There was a sense of routine in his movements, a rhythm that came from years of living close to the land and respecting its demands. As the Apache approached the edge of the ranch, he slowed his steps. His hand instinctively rested on the small knife at his belt. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he knew the importance of being prepared. He had grown up learning to read the land, to sense the intentions of those who walked it. The rancher, for his part, sensed the presence of someone nearby, though he could not yet see who it was. He straightened and paused, listening. The morning was quiet, except for the distant call of birds and the soft rustling of grass in the wind. Finally, the Apache stepped into view. The rancher noticed him immediately, a tall figure moving with confidence and caution. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was silence. Neither spoke, but both studied the other. The Apache's gaze was sharp, filled with questions and a hint of warning. He spoke first, his voice steady but cautious. "What do you want to do to me, cowboy?" The rancher didn't respond with words. Instead, he moved slowly to show he meant no harm. He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture of respect, and stepped back to indicate he wasn't going to attack. Then he went to the fence line, checking it carefully to make sure his cattle would not stray further onto the Apache's land. Every movement was deliberate, calm, and non-threatening. The Apache watched closely, studying each action, noticing the care with which the man handled the fence and the animals. Time seemed to stretch as the two men observed each other. The Apache had encountered outsiders before, and not all encounters had ended peacefully. But something about this man's actions, his patience, the careful way he treated the land and the animals, made the Apache pause. He lowered his hand from his knife slowly, testing the rancher's reactions. The rancher did not flinch or make any sudden moves. He continued his work, humming softly under his breath, focused on the task at hand. The Apache stepped closer, still cautious but curious. He noticed small details. The way the man's hands were calloused but steady, the calm expression on his face, the gentle way he guided a stray calf back toward the main herd. The rancher, sensing no immediate threat, finally glanced at the Apache and gave a small nod. It was a silent acknowledgement, a subtle signal of peace. The Apache considered his next move carefully. Words could be dangerous here. Actions would tell more about the man than any speech ever could. For several minutes, they stood in quiet observation. The rancher continued to tend to his cattle, repairing a fence post that had been weakened by the wind. The Apache circled the area, checking the ground for signs of disturbance, noting the tracks of other animals and humans. Every so often, their eyes met, and each time, the Apache felt a little less tension in his shoulders. He began to recognize that the man before him was not acting out of aggression or carelessness. His movements were deliberate, controlled, and filled with an understanding of the land that reminded the Apache of his own people's way of living. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the plains. The morning air was warm and a gentle breeze carried the scent of dry grass and earth. The Apache decided to speak again, but this time his tone was less guarded, more inquisitive. "You take care of your land," he said slowly, "and your animals. You respect this place." The rancher nodded, understanding the meaning behind the words. He didn't need to explain himself. His actions had already shown his intentions. He gestured toward the fence and then toward the herd, indicating that he was trying to ensure nothing harmed the land or the animals. The Apache studied him for a long moment and finally relaxed slightly. This man did not need to be challenged. His respect for the land and for life was evident in everything he did. As the morning progressed, the Apache walked alongside the rancher, observing the care he took with each animal. The rancher moved with a quiet confidence, showing knowledge and skill that could only come from years of experience. The Apache began to feel a sense of cautious curiosity. Perhaps this encounter would not end in conflict. Perhaps, in the simple actions of tending the land and animals, they could understand each other better than words ever allowed. By midday, both men had completed the immediate tasks before them. The rancher had repaired the fence and guided the stray cattle back to safety. The Apache had observed, learned, and slowly let go of his initial suspicion. They stood together for a moment, sharing the silence of the plains, each respecting the presence of the other. The Apache's hand rested lightly on his knife, but it was no longer a tool of immediate defense. It was a symbol of readiness, of being prepared, yet not seeking conflict. In that quiet moment, the Apache realized something important. Actions speak louder than words. The rancher had answered his question without saying a single thing. He had shown his intentions through his careful movements, his respect for the land, and his patient handling of the animals. The Apache nodded slightly, acknowledging the man's effort, and for the first time that morning he allowed himself to feel a sense of cautious trust. The rancher, too, sensed a shift. He had met many people who feared him or challenged him, but this man's presence was different. There was an understanding in his eyes, a recognition of the same principles of respect and care that guided the rancher's own life. Without exchanging further words, they both knew that this encounter had reached a tentative understanding. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the Apache prepared to leave, slipping back into the tall grass with the grace and quiet that marked his every movement. The rancher returned to his work, tending to the remaining cattle and ensuring that everything was in order for the night. Though they went their separate ways, a subtle connection had formed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that, despite differences in culture and experience, respect and understanding could be communicated through action alone. That day on the plains was a small, simple event, yet it carried the weight of lessons learned. The Apache had discovered that not all outsiders were threats, and the rancher had learned that patience and respect could open doors that words often could not. Both men carried away a quiet sense of reflection, knowing that the land they shared demanded care, vigilance, and understanding. And for both, this morning would remain a memory of the day when tension was replaced with cautious curiosity, and questions were answered not by speech, but by deeds. The afternoon sun stretched across the plains, warming the tall grasses and casting long shadows behind the scattered trees. The Apache moved carefully, following a trail that had grown faint with time. He was searching for a young calf that had wandered off from the herd, a task he had taken seriously since the animals were a crucial part of the land and life. The rancher, who had noticed the missing calf, followed at a respectful distance. He didn't speak much, understanding that the Apache valued quiet observation, but he was ready to lend his skills if needed. The Apache's eyes were sharp, scanning for any signs of movement or tracks that could lead them to the calf. He crouched low, examining footprints in the soft dirt, noting their direction and size. The rancher mimicked his careful steps, learning to read the ground through the Apache's example. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if the land itself demanded patience and respect. Each rustle of the grass or snap of a twig caused them both to pause, hearts beating slightly faster in anticipation. As they walked, the Apache began to notice small things about the rancher that surprised him. Despite being an outsider to the land he had grown up on, the man's understanding of the animals and the environment was clear. He moved with precision when guiding the cattle, knew how to anticipate their reactions, and seemed to share a similar rhythm with the land. The Apache felt a flicker of curiosity mixed with caution. Could this man be trusted, or was he simply clever at hiding his intentions? The terrain grew rougher as they moved closer to a dry creek bed. Rocks and uneven ground forced them to step carefully. The Apache paused, pointing to a set of hoofprints leading toward a cluster of trees. "The calf went this way," he said, his voice low but steady. The rancher nodded, silently following the direction without asking unnecessary questions. The Apache appreciated the quiet compliance. It suggested patience and respect rather than blind obedience. As they neared the trees, a sudden rustle caused both men to freeze. The rancher instinctively moved slightly in front, positioning himself to show readiness without aggression. From behind a bush, the young calf emerged, skittish and trembling. Its eyes were wide with fear, ears twitching at every sound. The Apache stepped forward slowly, hands open, showing calm and reassurance. The rancher followed his lead, mirroring the Apache's gentle approach. The calf hesitated, then slowly moved toward them, trusting their movements rather than their words. It was in this moment that the Apache noticed the subtle signs of cooperation and understanding. The rancher did not rush or make sudden gestures. He allowed the Apache to guide the animal, respecting the ways of someone more familiar with handling wildlife in this environment. Actions, once again, spoke louder than words. The Apache realized that the rancher's silence and careful attention were proof of his genuine intentions. After guiding the calf back toward the main herd, the Apache took a moment to observe the rancher. He saw a man who worked not only for his own gain, but with an understanding of responsibility toward the land and the creatures that depended on it. The Apache felt a growing sense of respect. Here was someone whose deeds matched what he had promised, even if he had not spoken a single word of assurance. As they continued walking, the Apache shared small insights into the land. How to read the wind, how to notice subtle changes in the grass that indicated water, and how the animals moved in response to unseen threats. The rancher listened intently, absorbing every detail, asking questions only when necessary. There was no rush, no need to impress. Each man simply worked with the land and with the task before them. Hours passed as they navigated the plains, checking for any signs of danger and ensuring the herd remained safe. Along the way, the Apache began to feel a subtle connection forming between himself and the rancher. It was not a friendship yet, not something easily named, but a mutual recognition of skill, patience, and respect. The rancher, too, was learning from the Apache, realizing that there was knowledge and wisdom in the land that could not be taught through books or instructions. It had to be experienced and understood firsthand. The sky began to shift into shades of orange and pink as the sun approached the horizon. They reached a small grove near a hill, a place where the cattle often rested during the hottest hours of the day. The Apache gestured for the rancher to wait while he checked the area carefully. He scanned the grove, noting broken branches and disturbed grass, signs that indicated where the calf had been hiding. Each step he took was deliberate, showing careful thought and awareness. The rancher followed, observing quietly and learning the nuances of the land through the Apache's movements. Suddenly, a soft sound came from behind a tree, a small rustling that was easy to miss. The Apache paused immediately, signaling the rancher to do the same. Together they crept forward, moving in harmony without needing to speak. They found the calf, caught in a small tangle of vines, struggling but unharmed. The Apache knelt down and gently freed the animal, speaking softly in his own language, words that the rancher did not understand but felt in the calmness of his actions. The rancher helped stabilize the calf, ensuring it wouldn't panic, and both men shared a moment of quiet accomplishment. After releasing the calf, the Apache and the rancher guided it back toward the herd. The journey was slow, with both men taking care to keep the calf calm. The rancher's patience impressed the Apache. He had expected words or commands, yet the man had shown understanding without forcing anything. The Apache realized that trust was being built not through conversation, but through careful, thoughtful action. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, they had returned the calf safely to the herd. The animals moved around them, calm and content, sensing the absence of immediate danger. The Apache stood and looked at the rancher, noting the dirt on his hands, the sweat on his brow, and the way he had remained steady throughout the long day. He finally spoke, his voice low but carrying a sense of acknowledgement. "You learn quickly," he said. "You understand more than I thought." The rancher nodded simply, understanding that no further explanation was needed. His actions throughout the day had communicated everything he wanted to express: patience, respect, and a willingness to work alongside someone who knew the land better than he did. The Apache felt a cautious admiration growing within him, recognizing that the man was not an enemy, but someone capable of honor and skill. As darkness fell, they walked back toward the ranch together, sharing the quiet of the evening. The Apache observed the sky as it turned deep blue, dotted with stars, and reflected on the lessons of the day. He realized that not all encounters needed to end in conflict. Sometimes, understanding and cooperation could emerge from patience, respect, and actions that spoke louder than words. The rancher, too, reflected on the day's events. He had begun the morning uncertain, unsure of how the Apache would react, yet by the end of the day, he felt a sense of mutual recognition. The land was harsh and demanding, but it also taught those who paid attention that patience, care, and respect could bridge even the widest gaps. Before parting ways for the evening, the Apache offered a small gesture of acknowledgement, a slight nod, almost imperceptible but filled with meaning. The rancher returned it, understanding its weight. Both men knew that the day had changed something fundamental. Their relationship had shifted from cautious suspicion to tentative trust, built slowly through careful observation and meaningful action. As they each returned to their separate paths for the night, the memory of the day lingered in both minds. The Apache thought of the rancher's steady hands and calm demeanor, while the rancher thought of the Apache's knowledge and skill. Both realized that the events of the afternoon had been more than a simple task of finding a stray calf. It had been a lesson in patience, observation, and understanding, a reminder that trust is earned through consistent, thoughtful action rather than words alone. And as the stars sparkled above the quiet plains, both men knew that this encounter, though brief, had left a lasting impression. It was the start of something subtle but meaningful, the possibility that two very different people, with different experiences and perspectives, could find common ground through respect, patience, and action. The land itself had witnessed their cooperation, and in its quiet way had approved. The following morning, the plains were bathed in a soft golden light. The Apache rose early, as he always did, moving with the ease of someone who had lived among these lands all his life. He scanned the horizon carefully, taking note of the wind, the position of the sun, and the subtle movements of the grass. His mind was focused, not just on the land itself, but on the lessons of the previous day. The rancher, who had stayed overnight at his small cabin on the edge of the plains, prepared to meet the Apache once more. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a fragile trust built on patience and careful observation. The task ahead was more demanding than simply guiding a stray calf. Word had reached the Apache that a section of the herd had wandered further than expected, near the edge of a rocky canyon. It was dangerous terrain, with uneven ground and sudden drops that could easily trap an unwary animal. The Apache knew that to guide the herd safely back, he would need help, and the rancher's skills and calm presence would be invaluable. He sent a brief signal, a subtle movement of his hand, and the rancher approached without hesitation. As they began the journey, the Apache spoke little, letting the actions guide the day. He demonstrated how to read the signs left by the herd, the broken twigs, the faint footprints, and the crushed grass. The rancher followed carefully, imitating the Apache's movements and listening with his eyes as much as his ears. Every so often, the Apache would glance back, checking for understanding, and the rancher would respond with a nod or a quiet gesture, showing that he was learning quickly and paying attention. The terrain became more challenging as they approached the rocky canyon. The ground was uneven, with loose stones that could easily shift beneath a foot. The Apache moved with caution, showing the rancher where to step and how to distribute weight to avoid slipping. Each movement was deliberate and controlled, a silent lesson in balance and care. The rancher followed closely, carefully observing and mimicking the Apache's techniques. It was clear to both that one wrong step could lead to injury, yet neither hesitated. The trust built between them allowed them to focus on the task rather than their fear. As they reached the edge of the canyon, they spotted the herd in the distance. A few cattle were dangerously close to the edge, and one young calf was separated from the rest. The Apache's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. He needed a plan to guide the animals safely back without causing panic. He turned to the rancher and made a subtle gesture, indicating that he would take the lead while the rancher supported from behind. The rancher understood immediately, moving into position to block potential escape routes and guide stragglers. The Apache began moving toward the herd, his presence calm yet authoritative. The animals responded, slowly turning and moving in the direction he indicated. The rancher mirrored the Apache's movements, using his own presence to guide the others and prevent them from running toward danger. The two men worked in tandem, an unspoken coordination forming between them. It was a delicate dance of patience, timing, and understanding, with every action having meaning. The young calf, however, panicked and ran toward the edge. The Apache reacted quickly, moving with precision to intercept it. The rancher followed, offering support and creating a safe path for the calf to follow. The moment was tense. One misstep could have resulted in disaster. Yet through careful movements and calm energy, they managed to redirect the calf towards safer ground. The herd slowly followed, guided by the combined efforts of the Apache and the rancher. Once the herd was safely away from the cliff's edge, the Apache and the rancher paused. The Apache wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at the rancher with a hint of approval. He had expected skill, but the rancher's calm demeanor and ability to act under pressure impressed him. The rancher, in turn, looked at the Apache with quiet respect, realizing the depth of knowledge and experience the man possessed. The canyon had tested them both, and they had passed together, relying on actions rather than words. They continued guiding the herd toward a safer area near a water source, moving slowly to ensure no animal was left behind. Along the way, the Apache shared insights about the land that he had never spoken aloud before. He showed the rancher how to identify signs of dehydration in cattle, how to find natural watering spots, and how to calm an animal that was frightened. The rancher listened intently, absorbing the lessons without interrupting, letting actions demonstrate understanding rather than asking unnecessary questions. As the day wore on, they encountered additional challenges. A sudden wind swept across the plains, spooking some of the cattle. The Apache remained calm, using his voice and body language to guide the animals without creating panic. The rancher followed suit, learning to trust the subtle cues the Apache used. Each obstacle strengthened their cooperation, showing that mutual respect and careful observation could overcome even the most difficult situations. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. They finally reached a shaded area near a stream, where the cattle could rest safely for the night. The Apache checked each animal carefully, ensuring that none were injured or lost. The rancher assisted, moving quietly and methodically, his actions mirroring the Apache's precision. The Apache nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the rancher's competence and patience. Sitting by the stream, the Apache and the rancher finally allowed themselves a moment to rest. The Apache reflected on the day's events, realizing that his initial skepticism of the rancher had been unfounded. The man's actions had proven his character, showing skill, patience, and respect for the land and animals. The rancher, too, considered the lessons he had learned. He had come to understand that true knowledge of the land was not something that could be taught through words alone. It had to be experienced, observed, and respected. The evening air grew cooler, carrying the scent of fresh water and dry grass. The Apache spoke softly, explaining how he had learned to survive on these plains, how every plant, animal, and rock had a purpose, and how understanding them could mean the difference between life and death. The rancher listened closely, absorbing every detail, knowing that this knowledge was priceless and could not be gained elsewhere. As night fell, the stars appeared above, twinkling brightly in the clear sky. The Apache looked up and thought about the vastness of the land and the responsibility that came with knowing it. He realized that the rancher, through his actions, had shown a willingness to respect this responsibility. The rancher, sitting nearby, felt a sense of accomplishment, not just in guiding the herd, but in building trust with someone whose life and experience were so different from his own. Before parting ways for the night, the Apache offered a gesture of acknowledgement. He extended his hand briefly, not as a greeting, but as a sign of mutual respect and recognition of the day's shared effort. The rancher responded, gripping the hand firmly, understanding its meaning. They both knew that the events of the day had formed a bond between them, a bond built on action, patience, and understanding rather than words. As the rancher returned to his cabin and the Apache moved back toward his camp, both men carried the memory of the day with them. The canyon had been a test, a challenge to their skills, patience, and ability to trust one another. They had succeeded not by speaking, but by observing, acting carefully, and learning from each other's actions. The Apache reflected on the idea that some lessons could only be taught through experience, and that trust, once earned, was more valuable than any words could convey. The night was quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of wildlife. The Apache lay under the stars, thinking about the day's events and the lessons learned. The rancher, too, sat quietly in his cabin, contemplating the experiences he had shared with the Apache. Both men understood that the land required respect, patience, and understanding, and that their shared efforts had created a bridge between two very different lives. In the days that followed, their interactions continued to grow, each encounter reinforcing the lessons of trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. The Apache saw that the rancher's actions were consistent, not just one-time gestures, and the rancher observed the Apache's skill and knowledge, learning from each step. Together, they navigated challenges, guided the herd, and ensured the safety of the land and animals. By the end of this chapter of their lives, it was clear that something significant had shifted. The canyon had tested their abilities, patience, and trust, and both had risen to the occasion. They had discovered that true understanding came not from words, but from shared experiences and deliberate, thoughtful action. The bond formed in those hours would influence their future interactions, creating a foundation of respect and cooperation that neither man had anticipated. The Apache knew that he had found an ally, someone who could act with integrity even in unfamiliar situations. The rancher knew that he had learned lessons that could not be found in books, lessons about patience, observation, and respect for both people and the land. Together, they had faced a challenge that tested their limits, and together they had succeeded. And so, as the night embraced the plains and the stars shone above, both men rested with the quiet satisfaction that comes from a day well spent, a challenge overcome, and the knowledge that trust, once earned through actions rather than words, could last far longer than any spoken promise. The following morning brought a cool breeze across the plains, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and wild grasses. The Apache rose early, as he always did, and walked toward the edge of his territory. He felt a mixture of curiosity and unease, for the days spent with the rancher had shown him that trust, while growing, was still delicate. The rancher, aware of the Apache's movements, prepared for another day of cooperation, though neither spoke openly about what lay ahead. The land itself seemed to hold a tension in the air, as if it anticipated challenges yet to come. The task for the day was not easy. A part of the herd had wandered far beyond the usual grazing area, near a marshy region where the ground could be treacherous. Some of the cattle had become stuck in the soft mud, and the risk of losing them entirely was high. The Apache and the rancher needed to act carefully, but swiftly. Every step they took could make the difference between safety and disaster. The Apache led the way, his sharp eyes scanning for both animals and any subtle changes in the terrain. The rancher followed, learning to anticipate dangers through observation rather than instruction. As they approached the marsh, the Apache noticed signs of the trapped cattle. The ground was soft and uneven, with deep impressions where the animals had struggled to free themselves. He crouched low, pointing out the safest route for the rancher to follow. The rancher mimicked his movements, stepping carefully and adjusting his weight to avoid sinking into the mud. It was clear that the marsh would be a test of their patience and cooperation. The first of the trapped cattle came into view. A large cow was partially stuck, its legs sinking with every attempt to move. The Apache acted quickly, using a combination of ropes, careful nudging, and gentle guidance to prevent the animal from panicking. The rancher assisted, following the Apache's instructions and offering steady hands where needed. The calf had been separated from its mother, and the tension in the air was palpable. One wrong move could startle the herd and create chaos. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly to free the cattle, their bodies tired but their focus unwavering. The Apache spoke little, using gestures and subtle signals to communicate, while the rancher responded with actions rather than words. Each successful rescue reinforced the trust between them, but also revealed the stakes of their task. The land was unforgiving, and the consequences of mistakes were immediate and severe. During a brief pause, the Apache studied the rancher. He noticed the determination in the man's eyes, the careful attention to every detail, and the quiet resilience in his posture. Unlike others who had come and gone from these lands, the rancher did not rush or act recklessly. He followed the Apache's lead, but also showed initiative when the situation demanded it, thinking carefully about each move. The Apache realized that respect for the land and the animals had guided the rancher's actions, not fear or self-interest. The sun climbed high and the heat began to weigh on them. Sweat dripped from their brows and the marshy ground made every step exhausting, yet neither man complained. The Apache had learned long ago that endurance and patience were essential for survival, and the rancher had adopted the same mindset through observation. Together, they worked as a team, combining knowledge, skill, and determination to overcome the challenges before them. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed across the marsh, a branch snapping under the weight of something moving quickly. Both men froze, hearts racing, as a small herd of wild deer burst through the tall grass nearby. The sudden movement startled some of the trapped cattle, causing them to struggle harder in the mud. The Apache reacted immediately, moving with precision to calm the animals and prevent panic. The rancher followed closely, positioning himself to guide the herd away from danger. The chaos lasted only moments, but it tested their coordination and patience. The Apache noticed how the rancher remained composed despite the sudden surge of activity. He moved with intention, not haste, and his actions reflected an understanding of the animal's behavior. The Apache felt a mixture of relief and respect. This man, through his actions alone, had proven his reliability under pressure, reinforcing the trust that had begun to form between them. As the day progressed, the challenges continued. Another cow had wandered too close to the edge of a hidden embankment, risking a fall. The Apache quickly assessed the situation and signaled the rancher to assist. Together, they guided the animal back to safer ground, carefully using ropes and coordinated movements. Each success was a small victory, yet it was accompanied by exhaustion and a growing awareness of the unpredictable nature of the land. The Apache spoke at last, his voice calm but carrying weight. "The land tests us," he said. "It is not enough to act once or twice. We must be steady, patient, and aware at all times." The rancher nodded silently, understanding that the lesson was not only about handling cattle, but about the principles of patience, observation, and respect. The day had become more than a task. It was a test of character and endurance. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, the Apache and the rancher had managed to rescue every animal and guide the herd to a safer area. They stood together, breathing heavily, observing the land around them. The Apache noticed subtle signs of admiration in the rancher's expression. He had learned, adapted, and endured through every challenge. The Apache felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, recognizing the growth of trust and cooperation between them. However, the day was not without reflection. The Apache thought about how easy it could have been for this task to end in disaster if either man had acted without thought. He realized that patience, observation, and careful action were more valuable than strength or speed. The rancher, too, reflected on the experience. He had come to understand that the land demanded respect and attentiveness, and that the Apache's guidance had been crucial in navigating the challenges. As night fell, they prepared a small fire near the edge of the safe grazing area. The Apache shared lessons from his life, speaking about survival, respect for nature, and the importance of learning from experience. The rancher listened intently, absorbing each word, though his attention was also on the quiet movements of the herd. Both men recognized that their shared experiences had created a bond deeper than simple cooperation. It was built on mutual respect and understanding. The fire crackled softly, casting shadows that danced across the plains. The Apache spoke again, reflecting on the day's challenges and the lessons learned. He explained that every step taken, every action performed, had consequences, and that understanding those consequences required careful observation and thoughtful decision-making. The rancher nodded, fully comprehending the depth of what had been communicated, not through words alone, but through shared experience. Before parting for the night, the Apache offered a gesture of acknowledgement to the rancher, a subtle nod, almost imperceptible but filled with meaning. The rancher returned it, understanding that the day had tested them both and strengthened their connection. They had faced challenges together, relied on each other's strengths, and grown in patience, skill, and mutual trust. As the stars appeared above the plains, both men settled in for the night. The Apache lay under the open sky, reflecting on the importance of careful observation and the lessons learned from shared experience. The rancher, sitting nearby, considered the challenges faced and the trust earned. Both knew that the land was unforgiving, but that patience, respect, and thoughtful action could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. In the quiet of the night, the Apache thought about the future. He knew that challenges would continue to arise, and that trust, while growing, must be constantly nurtured. The rancher, too, realized that the lessons learned today would guide him in the days ahead, not only in caring for the land and animals, but in understanding the importance of action, patience, and respect. By the time the moon rose high above the plains, both men had gained a deeper understanding of each other and the land they shared. They had faced challenges that tested skill, patience, and trust, and had emerged stronger and more connected. The Apache knew that the rancher had proven his worth through actions, and the rancher knew that the Apache's guidance had taught him lessons he would carry forever. The night air was calm, and the plains seemed to breathe along with them. Both men rested, reflecting on the day's events and the lessons learned. They understood that trust was fragile but could grow through careful action, that cooperation could overcome the harshest challenges, and that respect for the land and each other was essential for survival. In those quiet hours under the stars, a bond had formed, a bond built not on words, but on shared experience, understanding, and the recognition that both men were committed to learning from each other. It was a bond that would guide them through future challenges, a connection that went beyond simple cooperation to something deeper, rooted in patience, respect, and mutual trust. The next morning the plains were calm and quiet, the air crisp with the freshness of a new day. The Apache rose early, moving along the edge of his territory with practiced ease. He was alert, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble, though he carried a quiet confidence after the challenges of the past days. The rancher, too, prepared for the day, gathering tools and supplies for the work ahead. The events of previous days had created a bond of trust between them, one that needed to be honored through action and respect. Their task for the day was different from before. Most of the herd was safe now, but there were reports of a small group of cattle that had wandered farther than expected, toward the rough hills in the distance. The terrain was rocky and unpredictable, with loose stones and sudden drops. Guiding the cattle back safely would test their patience, skills, and the trust that had been carefully built between them. The Apache took the lead, his eyes sharp as ever, reading the ground, the tracks, and the subtle signs that animals left behind. The rancher followed closely, observing and learning, using the lessons he had absorbed from the Apache to anticipate potential dangers. They moved slowly, deliberately, understanding that every step mattered. The bond between them had grown, not through words, but through action, patience, and shared responsibility. As they neared the hills, they spotted the small group of cattle. A few were close to the edge of a cliff, grazing unaware of the danger beneath their hooves. The Apache motioned carefully to the rancher, signaling the approach they should take. The rancher responded, positioning himself to guide stragglers away from the cliff while allowing the Apache to lead the main group. The coordination between them had become almost seamless, a silent understanding built on the experience of the previous days. One of the calves, smaller and weaker than the others, slipped on a loose rock and stumbled dangerously close to the edge. The Apache reacted immediately, moving with precision to steady the animal. The rancher was there as well, offering support and creating a safe path for the calf to follow. The tension in the air was palpable, but through careful movements, they guided the animal to safety. The other cattle, sensing the calm energy of the men, followed along without panic. The Apache took a moment to observe the rancher, noting the calm determination in his eyes and the careful thought behind every action. The rancher, in turn, looked at the Apache, understanding the depth of knowledge and experience that had been guiding their efforts. Each man realized that they had learned from the other, combining their skills and insights to overcome challenges that neither could have faced alone. As the day progressed, they moved the herd toward a safer grazing area with ample water and shelter. The Apache shared insights about the terrain and the animals, pointing out the best paths to avoid hidden dangers, how to find natural water sources, and how to calm nervous cattle. The rancher followed closely, absorbing every lesson, applying it carefully to the task at hand. The cooperation between them was fluid, almost instinctive, reflecting the trust and respect that had grown over the past days. During a brief pause, the Apache spoke softly. "You have learned much," he said, "but the land is never finished teaching. Each day brings new lessons, and each action matters." The rancher nodded, understanding that the wisdom he had gained was not limited to managing cattle, but applied to patience, observation, and respect in every part of life. He had realized that true understanding came not from instruction alone, but from experience and attentive action. They continued guiding the herd, encountering small obstacles along the way. A sudden gust of wind spooked a few of the cattle, and the Apache acted immediately, positioning himself calmly and guiding the animals back to the path. The rancher followed suit, using his presence to prevent further panic. Together they moved in harmony, each action reinforcing the lessons of trust, patience, and careful observation. By late afternoon, they reached a large, shaded area near a stream. The herd was finally safe, grazing calmly as the two men observed. The Apache checked each animal carefully, ensuring that none were lost or injured. The rancher assisted, moving quietly and methodically, mirroring the Apache's actions. It was clear that both men had gained a deep understanding of each other's strengths and the importance of working together. The Apache finally spoke again, his voice calm but carrying significance. "We have done well," he said, "but remember, respect and care must continue. It is not enough to act once. Every day, the land and the animals demand attention and understanding." The rancher nodded, fully comprehending the meaning behind his words. He had learned that true responsibility came not from action alone, but from consistent care, awareness, and patience. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, they prepared a small fire near the stream. The Apache shared stories of his life, of survival and lessons learned from the land, emphasizing the importance of patience, observation, and respect for all living beings. The rancher listened carefully, absorbing not just the words but the wisdom behind them. He realized that the lessons were not only for managing cattle, but for life itself. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the plains. The Apache and the rancher reflected on the events of the past days, the challenges, the lessons, and the growth that had come from working together. They had faced difficult situations, relied on each other's skills, and learned to trust actions more than words. The bond that had formed between them was stronger than either had anticipated, built on mutual respect, patience, and understanding. Before parting for the night, the Apache offered a gesture of acknowledgement to the rancher, a nod that carried weight far beyond a simple greeting. The rancher responded with a firm but respectful grip of the hand. They both understood that the days they had spent together had created a lasting connection, one that would guide their interactions in the future. It was a bond built on experience, trust, and the recognition of shared values. As the stars filled the sky, both men settled into the quiet of the plains. The Apache lay beneath the open heavens, reflecting on the lessons learned and the importance of patience, respect, and careful action. The rancher sat nearby, contemplating the growth and understanding he had gained from the Apache's guidance. Both knew that the land demanded respect, and that true trust was earned through consistent, thoughtful deeds rather than words alone. The night was peaceful, broken only by the soft sounds of water from the stream and the distant calls of wildlife. Both men understood that the challenges they had faced had taught them not just about cattle and terrain, but about life itself. They had discovered the value of patience, observation, cooperation, and respect, lessons that would stay with them forever. The following morning, They worked together once more to ensure that the herd was safe and that the land remained undisturbed. The Apache demonstrated how to identify signs of water, safe grazing areas, and hidden dangers, while the rancher applied his knowledge and skills to support the animals and the Apache's guidance. Their actions were fluid, efficient, and marked by a deep mutual understanding that had been cultivated through shared experience. By mid-morning, the herd was secure, and the two men paused to rest. The Apache spoke quietly, reflecting on the journey. "You have learned much and your actions have shown your respect," he said. "But remember, every day brings new challenges. Respect, patience, and careful observation must continue." The rancher nodded, knowing that the lessons he had learned would guide him not only in caring for the land and animals, but in all aspects of life. As they parted ways for the day, a sense of quiet satisfaction lingered between them. The Apache returned to his camp, and the rancher to his cabin, both carrying the knowledge, experience, and trust built over the days of shared effort. They had faced challenges together, learned from one another, and discovered the strength of cooperation, patience, and respect. The plains, vast and quiet, seemed to acknowledge their efforts. The land had tested them, and they had succeeded through careful observation, thoughtful action, and mutual respect. The bond between the Apache and the rancher had become a lasting connection, one that would influence their future encounters and guide them in the challenges that lay ahead. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, both men reflected on the journey they had undertaken. They had learned that words were often unnecessary when actions spoke clearly, and that trust could be built through consistent, patient, and respectful behavior. The Apache knew that the rancher had proven himself trustworthy and capable. While the rancher understood the depth of knowledge, patience, and skill the Apache possessed. In the quiet of the evening, beneath the stars that had guided travelers and animals for generations, both men carried a sense of accomplishment and understanding. They had faced the challenges of the land, relied on each other's strengths, and grown in patience, skill, and trust. Their shared experiences had created a bond that transcended differences in culture, background, and experience. The Apache reflected on the lessons learned. Patience, observation, and respect were essential for survival and for meaningful cooperation. The rancher realized that the same principles applied to life beyond the land. Careful action, consistent effort, and respect for others were the foundation of trust and understanding. Both men knew that the days they had spent together had created a connection that would last, guiding their actions, decisions, and interactions in the future. And so, as night fell over the vast plains, the Apache and the rancher rested, carrying with them the quiet knowledge that trust, respect, and understanding could be earned through actions, patience, and shared experience. The land had tested them, the challenges had strengthened them, and the bond they had formed would remain a lasting testament to the power of cooperation, respect, and thoughtful action.